The garden. When we first bought the house, the garden was what sold it for me. A large, sprawling expanse behind the old Victorian home, fenced off from the world by tall, overgrown hedges. It was wild, untamed. I could already picture what it could become with just a little work. Flowers, pathways, maybe a fountain. A retreat. But that was before the nights. It started subtly at first. We had moved in early spring, and every evening as the sun went down, I'd hear a strange rustling outside. At first I thought it was just the wind or small animals scurrying through the bushes. But there was something unnatural about the sound, something too deliberate. It didn't come from one place but seemed to circle the house, just beyond the edge of the garden. I mentioned it to my wife, but she brushed it off, laughing and saying I had an overactive imagination. Maybe she was right, so I tried to ignore it. Then one evening while working late in the study, I glanced out the window and saw something moving in the garden. A figure barely visible in the twilight, standing just at the edge of the hedges. My breath caught in my throat. It was too dark to make out any details, but I could see enough to know it was human-shaped, tall and unmoving. I froze, my hand hovering over the curtain, unsure whether to pull it closed or keep watching. I blinked and it was gone. I convinced myself it was a trick of the light, that I was tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. But the next night, it happened again. The same figure standing just beyond the hedges, still and silent. This time I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a flashlight and stormed out into the garden. My heart was pounding, a mix of fear and anger swirling in my chest. I was sure it was just some local kids messing with me. But when I reached the spot where I had seen the figure, there was nothing. No footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. Just the overgrown grass and the whisper of wind through the leaves. As I stood there, the silence of the garden pressed in on me. It felt wrong, like I wasn't alone. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and suddenly I had the overwhelming sense that something was watching me from the shadows. I spun around, my flashlight darting across the yard, but there was nothing there. I didn't sleep much that night. Days passed, but the sightings grew more frequent. The figure appeared almost every night, always in the same place, always just at the edge of the garden. My wife never saw it. She thought I was losing my mind. "Stress from the move," she said. "It's just your imagination." But I knew what I saw. One night, determined to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy, I set up a camera facing the garden. I wanted to catch whatever it was on film. I stayed up late, watching the footage in real time on my laptop, my eyes glued to the screen. Hours passed and nothing happened. Just the usual rustling of trees and the distant chirping of crickets. But then, at around 3 a.m., the camera flickered. For a split second, the feed went dark. And when it came back, the figure was there. Closer this time, standing just a few feet from the camera, its face turned toward the house. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the screen. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, like it was waiting for something. Then, just as quickly as it had appeared, the feed cut out again. When it returned, the garden was empty. I replayed the footage over and over, trying to make sense of it. The figure was blurry, its features indistinct, but there was something about it that chilled me to my core. It wasn't human, or if it had been, it wasn't anymore. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt like something was in the room with me, watching, waiting. The next morning, I went out to the garden. The air was thick and still, the morning sun casting long shadows across the yard. As I walked to the spot where I had seen the figure on the camera, I noticed something strange. The ground was disturbed, the grass flattened in a rough circle, as if something heavy had been standing there. My heart raced. I knelt down, running my hand over the flattened grass, and that's when I saw it. Bones. Small, brittle bones scattered beneath the surface, as if something had been buried there long ago and was now clawing its way back to the surface. I stood up, backing away slowly, my mind racing. I didn't know what to think, what to do. But as I turned to head back to the house, I saw something that stopped me cold. There, in the center of the garden, was a new grave, freshly dug, and there was a shovel resting against the fence. I hadn't dug it, but I knew who it was for.